Boys deserve to be entertained. Modern Hollywood produces nothing special for them, and I'm going to explain that this isn't just due to ideology. There's something more fundamental and more disheartening going on. Firstly, we need to spell out what boys want and are missing out on. Boys are thrilled by the liminal territory of reaching for a higher branch, of attempting a skate trick just beyond their skills, some new sensation that is fueled with originality and risk. In entertainment, it is the same. They are magnetically drawn to content that is several years beyond their age, with violence and gore and suspense they're not sure they'll be able to handle. Stuff that might make them flinch or leave them reeling when they're trying to get to sleep. They love stuff that pushes those limits. Terminator 2. Non-stop adrenaline-fueled kinetic action, with an awesome robot chasing another awesome robot with shotgun twirls, motorbikes, a truck, a freeway obstacle course, and Guns N' Roses playing over the top. The Matrix, where a hero was revealed as just a drone in a pod, his life force being harvested like millions more in a terrifying existential dystopian nightmare, who then gets cybernetic upgrades and uploads skill sets into his brain like freebasing pure awesomeness. Can modern Hollywood produce any content like this that would viscerally appeal to boys? Fuck no. Boys are capable of aching yearning for films that strike surprising registers of sensitivity. Bastian Bucks, up in the school attic at night, reading the never-ending story. The sensitive boy in The Goonies, who speaks solemnly to the skeletons of the pirates. Elliot in E.T., born aloft, face pale in Halloween makeup, cycling by the light of a full moon. Can contemporary Hollywood produce content that strikes at these sensitive registers for boys? Like fuck it can. Boys also like third act overload. Ghostbusters starts off as a goofy premise that escalates into a madcap spectacle, where the Ghostbusters are cheered by enormous crowds to the rhythm of a killer theme song as they do battle with a gigantic Stay-Puft mascot who rampages through Manhattan and explodes after the hero's backpack lasers cross their streams to disintegrate it. The Blues Brothers begins as a small fetch quest, but by the third act, the two heroes are involved in an over-the-top car chase where police cruisers are crashing wildly with a constant blare of sirens, culminating with SWAT scaling the building the two characters are in, with helicopters hammering overhead and army vehicles in the barricaded streets below. Boys watching are nearly falling off the couch in delight at the comic escalation and anarchic excess. Can contemporary Hollywood create that kind of manic spirit of escalation and overload that makes boys ecstatic? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Boys are also incredibly keen on intelligent sci-fi fantasy, with a clear sense of the adults having conceived of and written scripts at least as much for themselves as for a young audience. Boys love the idea of adults writing with grown-up sensibilities and grown-up interests in science and ethics and technology. They feel drawn into something sophisticated and substantial. Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, revolving around a complex scientific device, with literary references to Moby Dick and A Tale of Two Cities. Old school TV, Children of the Stones, where a teen boy son of a technical engineer uses his own aptitude and curiosity with physics and astronomy and other STEM proclivities to ably and competently solve a mystery. The Tripods, a trio of boys traverse Europe conquered and monitored by tripod alien overlords who cap the heads of teenagers with a brain-controlling gold plate enmeshed into the skull. The boys are faced with conundrums about free will and then existential horrors in the Tripod City. Can modern Hollywood create content that is gripping in its adult approaches and with boys depicted as adept at problem solving and pushed to the limits of resourcefulness and courage? Fuck no. What are boys presented with instead? Lord of the fucking Rings, the Rings of Power, with meandering story arcs, dithering characters, hyper-diversity foregrounded, irrespective of context, and a ludicrous, snide, supreme girl boss Galadriel, who routinely sends up and bests men. Doctor Who, full of pizzazz, who's overly emotional and cries in literally every episode. Star Wars, where Supreme Girl Boss Rey gets ever more powerful without ever having any flaws. Marvel, with a lightweight Fantastic Four and morally empty girl boss in Ironheart, and DC, with a lightweight Superman who is often self-deprecating and high-strung, or Star Trek Starfleet Academy, where a group of overweight or eccentric or lesbian women run the show and lecture a new generation of hyper-diverse and tedious cadets. Disney has even slowly come to realize it has lost this huge demographic, releasing a memo asking how it can appeal to boys again. Too late. Many have already turned to gaming and anime, and they're not especially interested in being lured back. You done fucked up. You shit the bed. You screwed the pooch. You screwed the pooch anally, so that the pooch's slackened sphincter caused it to also shit the bed. But here's the thing. If this were only about ideology, some mix of wanting to empower female characters and give agency and visibility to diverse groups, spiked with some muddled, discredited notions about social constructivism and gender, or even some attitudinal thing about the contemporary world, that would be bad enough. But the problems run much deeper. It's developmental. Modern writers' rooms are now staffed by people whose imaginations aren't able to create the kinds of stories boys once devoured and obsessed over. Many of the people now tasked with writing spectacle, danger, myth, and power fantasy didn't grow up rehearsing those things in play. Earlier generations performed imagination, daily, physically, socially, recklessly. They built worlds with whatever was to hand. Action figures, Legos, sticks, bikes, rooftops, skate ramps, back gardens, creeks, or abandoned lots. Characters died and returned, factions formed and dissolved, toy brands crossed over, IPs were mishmashed, narrative coherence morphed with imaginative drive. And this imagination was fused with exertion, danger, and consequence. Running, climbing, falling, bruising, mastering fear. Adrenaline didn't arrive through a screen, it arrived through the body. Decades of research shows this isn't just nostalgia talking. For the newer generation, that kind of play has diminished. Unscheduled outdoor play steadily gave way to structured, adult-regulated activities and indoor sedentary alternatives. Children now spend far more hours engaging with screens than wandering woods, building forts, or chasing friends through fields. Screens are not just another toy. They deliver immediate, externally supplied worlds with rules and narratives already defined. In unstructured play, the child must invent the world, the rules, the characters, the conflicts, and the stakes. Screens provide sensory stimulation and feedback, but they reduce the cognitive burden of creation itself. Even when digital games have immersive environments, and many do, they often function like highly engineered reward loops: anticipation, stimulus, feedback, reset. Designers aim to keep the players engaged, not thinking in gaps. There is rich evidence in game design research that many platforms are optimized to prolong engagement by creating habits of consumption rather than patterns of self-generated invention. The imagination that built worlds from sticks and figurines did so under conditions of delay and uncertainty. You didn't know what would happen next until you made it happen. That's where long, sustained narrative thinking begins. Holding an imaginary world in your head for hours, days, or weeks. That's proto-writing. That's world-building. With modern screen immersion, the imaginative load is reduced. Children consume narrative. They don't produce it in their own minds. It's just not possible that people could grow up with all that shit and not have it affect their raw compositional and imaginative instincts to at least some extent. In the past, there were these things called role-playing games. Basically, kids would spend all night conjuring up a world with a board, multi-sided dice, counters, and basic scripts. It relied not just on sustained imagination, but a collusion of the same imagined world. Now, the child does not have to imagine the dragon or defend a makeshift fortress at dusk. The game provides the world, the goals, the risks, the stakes. The child responds. They don't really invent. The well-known Torrance tests of creative thinking, which measure divergent thinking skills like fluency, originality, and elaboration, have shown that scores on these measures have stagnated or declined in many cohorts. It's the idea of divergency that's the most troubling. Philip K. Dick was divergent, and H.R. Geiger, that off-kilter guy who dreamt up what would become the imagery for Alien, and George Lucas conjuring up THX 1138. You know where this notion of divergency has been largely redirected to? Come on, you must know. It's identity. Being half Latino, or Asian, or bisexual and Puerto Rican is a kind of substitute or wonky proxy for the idea of being divergent at a disproportionate rate to the idea of welcoming and rewarding creative and imaginative divergency. So when those children grow up and enter writing rooms, what do they bring with them? They bring fluency in media consumption. They bring sophistication in critique. They bring sensitivity to representation, discourse, and identity. What they often don't bring is instincts to roam imaginative hinterlands, to conceive grand, risky, mythic narratives that enthrall, and that are especially going to enthrall boys. They don't naturally reach for the kinds of stories that feel slightly irresponsible to tell, the ones boys latch onto because they feel real, because they were rehearsed physically and imaginatively long before a camera ever saw them. Instead, they default to what they know. Commentary, deconstruction, subversion. This is why so much modern writing feels bloodless, and why so much weird emphasis is put on snarky humor, put-downs, forced and attitude-heavy interactions. At that tight framing, narrowed into those exchanges, these writers have a better sense of control. There's less imagination there, less of an outer world. It's kind of safer. They compensate through empowerment, moralizing, and current-daying the viewer. Boys can smell that instantly. They deserve entertainment. For them, that is special. They don't articulate it in sociological terms. They just disengage. The story doesn't get argued about at lunch. It doesn't generate what-if speculation. It doesn't leave any long-term cultural footprint. Earlier generations of creators knew how to do this because their childhoods were messy, embodied, improvisational, and occasionally stupid, which is exactly what imagination needs. This is the quiet tragedy behind Hollywood's failure with boys. A generation of storytellers who never learned to live inside danger long enough to make it compelling on the page. By the way, my novels are now available on Amazon, so you can access them wherever you live. The latest is called Variations on a Theme. It's a work of literary fiction, and the link will be in the description. In 1989, aged 17, Danny landed a role in a literary play and was drawn into the ecstasy-driven hedonism of London's rave scene. Far from home, he fell under the influence of a circle in the cultural establishment who used drugs and status to exploit him and his friends. 30 years on, the Crown Prosecution Service is building a case that, if pursued, would place Danny at the center of a high-profile trial. The memories he can summon might decide the fate of the case. When an old friend urges him to get in touch with the others from that long-ago summer, Danny is confronted with the long-term consequences of their experiences. With the prosecution gaining momentum, he must reckon with a painful question. How can someone believe almost their entire life that they were not abused, and then change their mind?